Let's talk a little NBA. So I said this about Miami. You've been in this league long enough. There are teams that are built for the regular season, and I compare the Miami Heat this year to Utah. Great coach. They play defense, deep bench. But the NBA comes down to who's got the best two get-a-bucket guys.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like Jimmy Butler, but he's better. To me, he's an athlete, gives you 20 a night. He's not a great get-a-bucket guy, like a Kawhi, like a LeBron, like a Steph. And I look at Miami, and I'm like, I know they're a number one seed. But Philadelphia gives me Harden and Embiid. Those are two of the four best get-a-bucket guys in the.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have a hard time buying into Miami. What do you like about them or not?
I like them. I think, first of all, they're, like you said, they're the number one seed, and their top four guys haven't really played much together this year, right? But in their half-court offense, they don't really have it. They got guys like Tyler Hero that have to create for them and get a bucket, Jimmy, and that's not really their role, right? So I think they've had a great year. I think they're starting to get fully healthy. I think they're going to start meshing, but championship contender, I just, for whatever reason, I'm not buying it.
What do you make of my fascination with Harden, who I didn't love early, but I think he's real. I mean, my eyes tell me he's a better teammate now than he was 6 years ago.
Well, I'll tell you this. I played with James for 2 years in Houston. The era you didn't like him. I had my best year ever with him. I averaged close to 18 points a game with him, and that was strictly off the attention that he got, right? So he does his ISO thing. You know, he lulls the defense to sleep. I would just stand on the other end of the court. He would lull my defender to sleep. He'd kick it to me. I'd either catch and go, shoot the three, or do my little shot fake and get in the paint. But to him, for him, I think he's very unselfish. I think he kind of gets a bad rep just because all the forcing trades, doing all this. But like you said, he's a very willing passer. He's an unbelievable scorer, probably one of the best ISO scorers of all time.
No, he's in that Kobe Bryant efficiency
and
class.
Like you said, you need that. You need game on the line. You need someone like James Harden to go get you a bucket, to get to the foul line. And he does that at an elite level. And like I said, personally, dude's a great guy, great teammate, and like every star, you got to deal with some stuff, right? He's not gonna practice every day. He's not gonna do everything that everyone else does.
That's right.
But he's giving you 40 and 10 and 7 the next night, and you just learn to live with that.
Listen, Clyde Drexler was not a good practice player. Barkley didn't like to practice. Yeah. Iverson wasn't a big practice guy.
Yeah,
it's it is funny about this. We forget this. It's 82 games. It's a winter league. So you get off that plane in Milwaukee, and then you get on a van, and then you go to a hotel, and then you, when you start looking at the NBA right now, and I want to talk about the Lakers because they're obviously very, very popular. LeBron plays well with virtually everybody. Westbrook doesn't play well almost with anybody. But give me the first time you were on the floor with LeBron James. The first time, and as a basketball guy, kind of you're a guy that knows the sport. Yeah. Your first interpretations of what you were watching.
Just wow. I mean, first of all, he's a physical specimen, right? There's NBA players, and then there's guys like LeBron, where he's 6'8", he's 270, he's straight yoked. Like he can do it all. He sees the floor. He's a willing passer. He can get you a bucket. In my eyes, he's the best player of all time. Yeah. Like I think he's the new generation, the best resources, fastest, strongest basketball player of all time. And so when you go against him, you just try and honestly limit his touches, be as physical as you can with him, which is tough because he's more physical than anyone that's guarding him.
How much do you weigh when you guarded him?
I was like 220, 225.
Oh, good.
So yeah, it's like, again, you just try and deny him the ball. You try and make him hit tough shots and just hope he settles, honestly.
Yeah, I remember seeing him years ago in Miami. I think you worked in Miami, Joey. I went to a Heat game, and it was a really interesting game. They were blowing somebody out. It was the Clippers. They were blowing the Clippers out. It was like 10 years ago. And Caron Butler's a heck of a player. Right. I think it was Caron, came out to guard him. And LeBron scored on him 3 straight times. And he did this was when LeBron was really in Miami coming into his prime. He did a left-hander off the glass, and Caron was on him like a glove. Yeah. And I turned to, I think it was Ann, I turned to, and I was like, people can't do that.
It's the shots like that, though, that you just have to live with when you guard him. You want him to have to take the lefty running hooks or the fadeaway one-leg jumpers. Those are the ones that you're okay with. It's the blow-bys, the easy buckets that you want to limit for a guy like LeBron.
I said this week, it got some blowback, and you were in Memphis for 3 years. They love their hoops. That Ja Morant's obviously remarkable. But I did see Derrick Rose, who was remarkable and took the league over. I mean, it's all we talked about for 2 years. when Young, and he's only 174 pounds, D. Rose was 200, Westbrook's 200. So he's 174 pounds. There's no hand check. You can't stay in front of him. Mm-hmm. He leads the NBA in paint scoring. And my takeaway is these guys down low are big. That floor is hard. I said, I know he's great. I worry about sustaining it. I saw Wall fall apart. John's not a great shooter. Rose wasn't a great shooter. Westbrook started getting hurt in year 6. Yeah. But if you don't shoot, if you're not a natural shooter like a Steph Curry, Dame, you got to score at the basket.
Right.
When I watch Ja, I'm like, how long can he be jumping over bigs? What do you make of it?
I mean, that's a question that nobody really has the answer to, right? I think you look at a guy like him, and he's 21, 22 years old, and he is leading the Memphis Grizzlies to a home court advantage playoff series. He's must-see TV. And, yeah, I see your point that he's not exactly – he can't really shoot from the outside. But for him to be doing what he's doing without doing that yet – he's had some bumps and bruises. He's going to miss some time. That comes with the long, grinding NBA season. But I think he's the best thing that's ever happened to Memphis. I think he's done an unbelievable job. And with injuries like that, you can't predict him, right? No one can ever see him coming. He's always going to add strength in the weight room. He's always going to work hard. He's always going to hopefully do the right things, meal plan, all this stuff to keep continuing to get bulk on him. But, I mean, it's hard to criticize a guy like him with watching what he's doing with that team, with, Jaren Jackson, who I think is fantastic, but then we start talking Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks as a third best player on a team, as the number 3 seed in the West.
They're pretty good.
That's nuts.
It used to be that international players, there were very few, they were very finesse and highly skilled. The domestic player, the D-Wade, was a tough guy. Our guys were tough guys. The international guys were known as lean. They go to those academies. They're highly skilled. You can push them around. Tony Kukoc.
Right.
Great player, but you can push him around. And all of a sudden, the international game, our guys get more skilled because they see that. So our guys are getting more skilled, and the international guys are getting tougher. And then here comes Luka. And he's like 19 years old. And I remember thinking, he doesn't look super athletic. He's kind of puffy. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I watched him his first year, and I'm like, dude, that's just 6'7" and a half of elbows. And he feels like he is the next wave of international players where he's got a chip on his shoulder. Yeah. He's physical. Jokic has some of this too. Right. I didn't feel like the international game gave us Jokic and Luka 20 years ago. First time you're on the floor with Luka, your thoughts about him as a player and international players as a whole.
So Luka is, if I'm taking one player now for the future, it's Luka Dončić. I think he's the best player in the NBA. I think with what he's done at his age is incredible, right? And it's when you see him, I never got a chance to play against him, but I've been around him. He's huge, and he can't be sped up. Whether you put a Patrick Beverley on him or a Kawhi Leonard, he does what he wants. He gets where he wants. He holds him off in the pick and roll. He's got the ISO step back 3. He's a willing passer. They've done a great job putting shooters and lob threats around him that make him even better. I think when you look at his body, you're like, he's a little pudgy. He's a kid. And so imagine him on a meal plan in the weight room. He's doing this without any of that. So, I mean, I think he's spectacular. I think he's destined for greatness. And I think he's the best player in the NBA.
Yeah. And he's got just an array of shots.
Yeah, he talks. He's tough. He's barking. I mean, he's almost barking at the refs too much, but he's getting his guys going. He's getting everybody involved.
Well, what's really interesting, Chandler? I heard a GM say this years ago that international players 20 years ago felt like visitors.
Yeah.
So they would come into our game and be like very respectful. They would never like demand a trade. It was like, no, I'm visiting. Luka's like, no, this is my place.
Oh, he's took over quick. Like it is his team. It's his league. He's unbelievable. And I honestly I looked them to make a good run in the playoffs this year.
You think so?
I just think he's special, man. I think he can do it all. I love the trade for them. I love Dinwiddie.
Yeah.
I love the system.
Does Spencer need the ball too much, though?
You know what? I think he's a great option. Guys like Luka, they can do everything, but they need those second and third players to relieve pressure. And when Luka gets in foul trouble or he goes out, you need the Spencer Dinwiddies of the world to go and get a bucket like we were talking about.
Chandler Parsons is joining us. The Zion Williams situation's interesting. I loved him. I talked to 2 general managers who said, listen, I would take him number 1, knowing weight could be an issue, and this kid ripped through shoes. What's he going to do to tendons? I want us to remember this. He literally was breaking Wilt Chamberlain's records when he played.
Right.
His first year on the floor was like, I mean, literally you could tell people just didn't want to take a charge. People didn't want to get in front of him.
Yeah.
I don't even know who to compare him to. When you watched him, was there a comp when you said, oh, he's going to be blank?
I'll say this. 4 or 5 years ago, we're watching him play at Duke, and one of this very, very, very smart, brilliant trainer, doctor I know, we're watching Duke play, and it's the game when he busts through the shoe, right? And he's saying, just speaking in anatomy terms, there's no way this dude can continue to do this with that athleticism, with that weight, with that body. He's not going to be able to last, and it's going to be a real issue. And it's sad because you see the production he has when he's playing. He's a top 10 player in the NBA. But, I mean, he's missing a lot of time, and it's a real concern. Do I think New Orleans trades him? Absolutely not. I think he's a franchise player, and I think they need to find ways to get him, on the floor. Not a lot of guys are picking New Orleans in free agency. Not a lot of guys are choosing to go there. But you see what they're doing now with CJ and Brandon Ingram. They're starting to look like a team. So you throw in a healthy Zion in the mix, then all of a sudden there's something to talk about. But it's a shame because Zion is this extreme talent, and we're just not seeing enough of him.
Chandler Parsons joining us. So when you did a Kobe story the other day, and I don't want a gravy train on it because it was on Up in Smoke with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. So I don't want to take away all the Kobe stuff. You told a hysterical Kobe story. Yeah. And you've already told it on that platform, so I want people to go to that platform and listen. I don't want to steal that story. Yeah. But it is Shaq at Kobe's funeral was hysterical telling Kobe stories. And Kobe was a very complex balance of the most confident person ever, but an incredibly cool guy to young guys. Mm-hmm. And I say this respectfully as a pro athlete. Was Kobe the most intimidating player to ever be on the court with? Because when I look at Kobe, I'm like, I saw dudes shrink around Kobe.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at guys like him, and Kobe and KG come to my mind. KG is just like, he's a nut talking to himself, screaming. He can be a little intimidating on the court as well.
Do you remember the first time you had to guard him?
Oh my gosh.
What was it like?
He probably talks the most trash of anyone I've ever played against. And like I said, he's talking to himself. He's screaming. He's getting the crowd riled up. He takes you out of your game just from what he's saying. Kobe, on the other hand, you just see Kobe's a killer on the court, right? When I guarded Kobe, he took that personal. He was offended that I was guarding him.
You weren't good enough to guard him.
Like, who is this kid guarding me? Like, no chance. Like, he's almost looking for the double team coming, like when I'm guarding him. And I don't think that was just me. I think that was honestly the approach and the mindset he had, whoever was guarding him.
Now, he talked too.
He talked so much too, but honestly, he was more like a sarcastic, like I'd shoot an air ball and he'd hit me on the butt and say "good shot" on the way back down. He was almost like a classier trash talker. You know what I mean? Good. Yeah, he was not as brutal as like a Kevin Garnett.
When I say this, when you look at your NBA career, it's 9 years in the NBA. If you could tell any young person coming into the draft, if you say to them, because you were a dominant, best player in the state, you're a dominant college player, and you had a very good NBA career. We have the NFL Combine, so the NFL draft's coming up. Yeah. So what would you, give me a couple pieces of advice that you would tell a young person, because now they're coming in, you guys are coming in at 19.
Right.
Just think about how college basketball years ago, Patrick Ewing came back 3 years at Georgetown. Duncan. Now it's like, the idea of staying a second year as a dominant big, it makes no sense at all, right? Give me a couple things you'd tell young kids.
Yeah, and I stayed all 4 years, so my process took a lot longer to get there, but I just think just to embrace it every single day, right? The things that you don't enjoy throughout that whole process, the shoot-arounds, the practices, the long film sessions, training camp. As a guy that's been out of the league now for 2 years, that's the stuff I miss. I miss the flights. I miss the locker room banter, all that little stuff that goes into the games, which is obviously, that's the prize. All that stuff is what I miss the most. So I think it truly flies by, man. And you never know when it's going to end, especially with injuries and with everything that's happening. You never know when your time's up. And so just work as hard as you can and enjoy it, because it flies by like that.
I could take you, we could go an hour. Okay. I'm going to ask you a series of questions.
Okay.
Looking for individual answers. Most underrated player in your decade in the league that didn't get love, but you thought he was a dog and a pain in the butt.
Most underrated player I got to go with Mike Conley. Until last year, as an all-star, finally got in as a replacement. He was the head of the snake on those grit and grind teams. He's just the best teammate, heck of a player,
super smart,
great smart guy. I think he's always just kind of been in the shadows, and he's had a heck of a career.
Strongest guy, a guy that physically, let's take LeBron out, but a guy physically that you couldn't match up with him, just too much.
In the decade?
Yeah.
Do you remember Pekovic from the Timberwolves? Nikolai Pekovic?
Yes. Why?
Can't move the guy. The strongest guy ever. The hardest screens I've ever tried to fight over. He was by far the strongest dude I've ever played against.
Ever tried to get through a Paul Millsap screen?
Yeah, he's a good one too.
Strong.
Oh yeah, he is country strong.
Who is the coach that made you the better version of yourself?
I would say JB Bickerstaff. He was my assistant in Houston when Mikhail was the head coach, and he was always he was the player development guy, but he was also the offensive guy, but he was the cool young coach who could relate to the players, but he had respect. JB, I think, and you see what he's doing now in Cleveland. I think he's the coach of the year with what he's doing with that roster.
It's a bunch of kids. They're terrific.
I think he's the coach of the year. So I think just him, the way he can personally relate to you, good times, bad times, he's always in your ear. He was by far my favorite coach I ever had.
Most underrated travel city. The place that you went to and you're like, oh, God, they got great food. They got good walking.
Okay. Most underrated. You know what? I like Minneapolis. It's cold. If you can take away that, which you really can't. But great food though, great people. I had a really good time in Minnesota.
Is it different playing in New York? You hear like the MJs and the Kobes, and we said this before. It's when I watch the Garden, they're so expressive. You can see their faces. Yeah. They feel like they're closer to the floor. What is it like to play in New York?
It's, as a basketball player, just, the Garden is the Mecca, right? It's the most famous arena. That's where it was my favorite place to play. It's just that atmosphere they create, all the celebrities there, the Knicks, the fans, the New Yorkers talking all the trash. That to me is just like, it's different. If you have 30 in Cleveland and you have 30 in the Garden, it just hits harder. You know what I mean? It's different. It's a different 30.
Every time I go to an NBA game, if I get good seats, I always think it's funny how often players talk.
Yeah.
They'll talk to you. Now, obviously, I'm on TV, but you see a bunch of people. There is something about being in the NBA. It's the second quarter. You lead by 11. Did you ever get into conversations with people?
No doubt. I was a big talker. I think, especially because when things are going well, you're kind of instigating the talking. But then when you're playing bad or you have an awful shot or something like that, then the fans are chirping. And I think it's good. I think it's fun. They're there. They're paying a lot of money to sit there and watch you play. I think, a casual, funny interaction just makes the game better, makes the sport better.
All right, Chandler Parsons, you can do whatever you want now in your career. I think you're going to be fantastic. And what a pleasure. They told me today you were coming in studio. This COVID thing, we haven't had many studio guests. So this has been absolutely fantastic. And we take a break, right?
Yes.
I always forget if I'm in my break time or I go to Joy. Chandler, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.